bringing the most talked about social issues and current affairs.
Taking Thomasian voice with field experts to every angle of the bottom line.
Tigers, it's time to keep our eyes open. Good day, everyone. I am Seril.
And I am Alzel Laguardia. Join us in this episode of Wake Up Thomasians.
Well, last July 3, 2020, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, officially designated as Republic Act number 11479. The law intends to prevent, prohibit, and penalize terrorism in the Philippines.
The anti-terror law came into effect on July 18, 2020, which replaced the Human Security Act of 2007.
Well, the 17-page law defines terrorism as an act committed by a person within or outside the Philippines who engage in activities intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person or endangers a person's life, to cause extensive damage or destruction to a government or public facility, public place, or private property, and to cause extensive interference with, damage, or destruction of critical infrastructure.
A terrorist is also described as an individual who commits any of the following, including but not limited to releasing of dangerous substance with the context of intimidating the public by spreading a message of fear or provoking the government by intimidation. Those who are proven guilty will be given life imprisonment without parole.
Even so, what the law entails is that the anti-terror law condemns any form of terrorism, as it is a threat to the national security of the country and the Filipino people.
Certain consequences will happen to an individual or a group that is classified as a terrorist by the Anti-Terrorism Council or ATC. Their assets will be frozen by the Anti-Money Laundering Council, and law agents can secretly wiretap their conversations, and all of the information relating to the said terrorist may be demanded from the service provider. There will also be restrictions when it comes to traveling, depending on the severity of the case or the evidence provided.
If the evidence of guilt is weak, the person will have limited travel capacity, and when the evidence of guilt is strong, the court will issue a whole departure order or HDO and tell the Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA to cancel the passport of the accused.
On the Section 29 of the Anti-Terror Law, the focus lies on detention without judicial warrant of arrest, which states that any law enforcement agent or military personnel who have been authorized by writing by the ATC must take a person suspected of committing any acts of terrorism, as stated in Sections 4 to 12, to the proper judicial authority within 14 days, counted from the moment a person has been arrested. This period of detention can be extended for various reasons, such as preserving of evidence related to terrorism, preventing another act of terrorism, or if the investigation is being conducted properly without delay.
Meanwhile, it is stated under the Human Security Act of 2007 that a suspected person can only be detained for no more than 3 days and would be automatically compensated if found not guilty of the accusation. Section 30 states that the rights of the person under custodial detention. In this section, an individual's rights are ensured, such as being informed of the cause of his or her arrest and being read of his or her Miranda rights.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to a lawyer. If you cannot afford a lawyer, you will be given a lawyer by the government. Yan yung sinasabi natin na Miranda Warnings.
The suspected person also has to be informed of the cause of his detention with the presence of his or her legal counsel. The person will be allowed to communicate freely with his or her family and freely avail the service of a physician. Under Section 51, the welfare of vulnerable groups such as those elderly, pregnant women, persons with disabilities, and women and children are emphasized and acknowledged if they are suspects under investigation, interrogation, or detention.
Not only will an individual proven guilty of terrorism can't be given the benefit of parole, but also be imprisoned for a range of 4 to 12 years, depending on the severity of the acts committed, and become liable as a principal to all terrorist activities committed.
However, if the person found guilty is a public official or an employee, he or she will be charged with the administrative offense of grave misconduct and disloyalty to the Republic of the Philippines and the Filipino people. That person will be given the penalty of dismissal from service, cancellation of civil service eligibility, forfeiture of retirement benefits, and disqualification from running for elective office or holding any public office.
Well, this law led to a spike of reactions from citizens all over the world and even gained various opinions from public officials, lawyers, and public groups. While netizens raised their concerns about the approval of the said act, some prominent newspapers have given their views regarding the matter at hand.
47 of Bohol's municipal and city peace and order councils support the Anti-Terrorism Act, to which they signed the manifesto of support for. Bohol Police Chief Senior Superintendent Joselito Clarito said that the anti-terror law could help aid in the realization of the President's command to end local communist armed conflicts soon.
The Department of Interior and Local Government Bohol Provincial Director Jerome Gonzalez emphasized that the country needs a law that will curb terrorism, mentioning that the Human Security Act of 2007 remains a dead-letter law and is severely underutilized.
Meanwhile, lawyers and public groups have filed petitions and protested against the law for it being quote-unquote unconstitutional.
Joined with the UP law professors who have filed the 11th petition against the anti-terror law are retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio and retired Justice and Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales. The petition revolves around requests for the Supreme Court to conduct oral arguments and immediately issue a temporary restraining order or TRO to stop the implementation of the law due to its vague definitions. It asks to declare null and void the entire anti-terror law.
Some groups and stakeholders from different sectors, led by the National Union of People's Lawyers or NUPL, including Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, Movement Against Tyranny, and Karapatan, electronically filed their petition, which supported previous calls in questioning the law's vagueness and potential for abuse.
With the rise of issues associated with the anti-terror law, it is a wonder how Thomasians and those in the education sector will perceive it. Wake Up Thomasians will be right back.
We've learned the many definitions of terrorism and how the process for an individual suspected of such crime will undergo. Now it's time to ask our fellow Thomasians about their views on the newly approved anti-terror law. This is Am I Right?
Joining us today are students from different programs in the university. We have Kevin Bernabe and Aliyah Matira, who are both from AB Legal Management, and Jairo Simatu and Bolo Pascual, both from the Faculty of Civil Law. Hello, Tigers! And welcome to Wake Up Thomasians. Thank you for sharing your time with us. How are you all doing?
Doing fantastic, Alzel.
All right. How about the others? How are you guys? How's your quarantine period?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
All right.
Let's start with the bottom line here. Now that this anti-terror law has been signed last July, then what do you think are the possible implications or the effects of this law for students like you? Let us start first with Kevin.
In the new anti-terror law, the free speech is now being regulated as well, and the provision itself is too questionable. It's too vague, and that it can be misinterpreted by the authorities to use it against our constitutional guaranteed rights of free speech and due process as well. And in effect, to students like us, and of course to all people in general, that people would now be afraid to voice out. They would rather to remain silent instead of speaking up their minds because they think that once they exercise their right to free speech, that they might be subjected to terrorism.
Over now to Jairus.
One of the key features of a healthy and sustainable democracy is to have dissent. You need to have dissent in order to have civic engagement in the first place. That's why we have this state, that's why we have this society, because we interact with each other and we exchange ideas. So imagine the danger it imposes upon your lives when there are already intelligence forces or state forces that are already monitoring your activity, which is already being done since schools are being militarized. In actuality, since Lumad schools are continually being bombed, cordoned off, and its students and teachers are starved from continuing their education. So, by red tagging alone, you are already curtailing the necessary steps in nation building.
Now, I just want to ask for students like you, for our guests, how do you feel, or what was the first thing that came into your mind when you found out that the law was already signed, or now that it's currently in effect? Let's ask Aliyah.
I was scared because as opinionated as I am, as you know, I really like to put my point across. I'm scared of what might happen to the people I love because with this law, it does not only just put me in danger. You know, I say one wrong thing and it goes viral, then my entire family is in danger. You see, I'm in legal management because I want to be a lawyer. And I want to be a lawyer because when I see injustice, I want to correct it. And at that moment, I was so scared that I might get hurt and the people around me might get hurt. So I just let it pass. But now I'm voicing my opinions again because, you know, that's how I was raised. I wasn't raised to be scared. I was raised to speak the truth and voice out my opinions as respectful as I could.
Let's hear it from Bolo, please.
What I did after was to speak louder about myself, to continuously share myself. And like there's also the phenomenon of like having fake accounts on Facebook, right? And then there's a lot of us. I'm sure like a couple of us also experienced that. And many of my friends have stopped talking about like politics and social issues. But my reaction to that is now's the best time to even speak up some more. You are a citizen with real views, real concerns, and you care for other people.
Given that there are sections in that law that seem to be questionable, if these were removed or revised, then would you be pro or against this law? Now let's start first with Kevin.
If those questionable provisions be removed or be revised, as long as it now favors more to the people, I would now be in favor of the new law because after all, the real intent of the new anti-terror law is to protect us from terrorism.
Over now to Aliyah.
Honestly, as much as I see the point of the anti-terror law, and I do believe that they really need to revise it. Even if they do, I don't think I'm gonna be all for it. As long as I know that the people in power are still the people in power now, like it's still them, I'm never gonna be comfortable having that kind of law around. Because as much I believe that it doesn't matter if the law has good intentions. If the people in power have very ill intentions, then it's not gonna work out.
If you guys will be given a chance to revise a few parts of the law, what are these things and that you guys will suggest as a student? Let's hear it from Jairus, please.
Actually, I would like to abolish the law in the first place, if possible. But if we are to place safeguards or deterrents, I would put back the 500,000 peso reward for each day that invalid warrantless arrest has gone by, since it inhibits security forces from acting upon their whims. And I would shorten the period as well from 14 days, if ever, to again the previous Security Act to 3 days, since each day or each hour is very essential, since the amount of abuses a person can take can be very much their breaking limit. I've worked in human rights. I've been involved in human rights work, and I've I'm certain that time is of the essence when it comes to torture, which is very much prevalent in our uh, security forces.
Let's hear it from Bolo, please.
I think that you're giving law enforcement agencies a harder job because now you also have to surveil likely innocent individuals. So I think that gives the agencies more work because now they're going to look at the privacy of different, most likely innocent individuals at the end of the day, rather than focusing on the already available actions we can take. It gives them a harder time. When we take a look at like if there's no prompt delivery to the courts right away, that means like innocent civilians can be inside detainment facilities. Who's going to be responsible for those innocent civilians inside the detainment facilities? Law enforcement agencies that have to feed them, that have to take care of them, all that stuff. So even in the debate of what is more strategic for the government and what is actually like gives the government an easier time to catch terrorists, this Anti-Terrorism Act even makes it harder and gives them more unnecessary jobs compared to the other already existing mechanisms we have that we could already just prioritize.
All right. Thank you very much, Bolo.
Yeah, very interesting perspectives that we heard from our guests today, right? Thank you very much, Tigers. And we are hoping that our Thomasians would be able to reflect and get significant points of view from your insights. Thank you so much, everyone, and please do stay safe. With the Thomasian voice finally heard, it's time to bring up the discussion with the field experts. Joining us today is a political science professor to share his thoughts about the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020.
Welcome to Wake Up Thomasians, Assistant Professor Ronald Castillo. Sir, good afternoon. And of course, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you also, guys, for inviting me for this very good, socially responsible event.
Well, good afternoon to you, sir. How are you? Are you this quarantine? How is it going at your end?
Oh, so of course, surviving, doing my best to adapt.
Right, let's get to the bottom line of this topic. Do you think there is a dire need now for the Anti-Terrorism Law, aside from the Human Security Act of 2007? Can you tell us the difference between the two? And we are currently in the middle of the pandemic, of course. Do you think enacting this law is really that urgent?
You know, Lee, that's the point of difference between those laws is something that people should be giving attention to. We have to be asking why. And when you asked me for this interview, I also did check because, of course, we can be looking at the present law, but we also should be looking at the past and do a bit of comparison. I got a copy of the Human Security Act, and I also did get a copy of the Anti-Terror Law or Anti-Terror Act of the 2020. There isn't enough to cluster each part of those two laws to put them into matrices. A good thing, though, was that people have been speaking against it already. Several cases have been filed against it at the Supreme Court. And something got into my mind. The vagueness and the idea that this law can be abused. So I had to check. What's vague? So it has been accused that the definition of terrorist was vague. So I double-checked. In a way, it wasn't as vague as some would say, because the very statement terrorist has always been vague. What do you mean by terrorist? So I checked. And in that quest to see what was vague about it, I found out the difference between those two laws. The addition of critical infrastructure in the Anti-Terror Law, which was not yet present way back in the Human Security Act. And this can spell a potential for danger, while keeping with the idea that a law should be keeping in times with the present or towards the future. The principle of repeal of law states that the law should be revised based on progress of the times. And right now, we're already in a digital age. So that's something a bit lacking in the former law. The present law incorporates critical infrastructure. So part of a terroristic act, does it threaten a critical infrastructure? And when you define critical infrastructure, it includes the physical government offices and also even the digital world, the digital streets, which can spell a potentially dangerous situation for us right now.
All right, sir. Now, you've mentioned that we are in the digital world, and a lot of people are actually expressing their sides via their social media accounts. So some people are supporting the ATL and some are not. Now, we just want to know what could be its positive and negative effects in the country and, of course, most especially the people.
The Philippines right now, ever since we've been an archipelago, that's a fact. But are we a state? Are we a republic that should be concerning ourselves with terrorism? When you hear terrorism, it should be something that you should be concerned about if you are living in the borders of the United States of America. But the Philippines, if you're a regular Filipino, is a terrorist threat something that you would be thinking about? If you're somebody living somewhere in Quezon City or somewhere in Manila, is a terroristic act the thing that you should be thinking about? Or is it that you're concerned about the COVID pandemic or about your health, the health of your loved ones? Even people living somewhere in the Visayas or in Mindanao who are already exposed to armed conflicts with separatist movements, with Islamic groups. Those things that I mentioned for the last part are actually reasons why we can think about the Philippines should be concerned with, even with terrorism also. And those threaten the sovereignty of the republic. When you say government, when you say the state, one vital element is sovereignty. And when you say sovereignty, it's the capacity to command and be obeyed within your borders, within your territory. The sovereignty of the Philippines is enforced through two agents. One, the Philippine Army, the military. Another is the Philippine National Police. We have those two because there are two versions of sovereignty, two sides of one coin. One is external. When you say sovereignty externally, no other state can control you or subjugate you. That's why we need the military to protect us. Internal sovereignty, the capacity to command and be obeyed, is enforced by the Philippine National Police. So anyone who violates Philippine law, of course, you call the police. If you feel threatened by someone, of course, you call the police. If peace and order is to be maintained, those two are needed. So when we talk about terroristic acts, in a way, we do need something that can protect the Philippines from terroristic threats. Way back when I was in the graduate school, we had a discussion in our geopolitics class at the University of Santo Tomas Graduate School. And there we were able to discover that somewhere to the south of the Philippines is a backdoor. To the south, we have Islamic groups who are against the unity of the state. So that's against stability. What more, the Celebes Sea to the south is the gateway to the heart of the Republic. It's one way to enter. So you can go there, take a boat, get out of the Philippines, and then you can also enter the Philippines if you go through there. It's not something that you can easily patrol. We have a need for a stable government, of course. That's the good thing. What's the bad about the anti-terror law is that, as mentioned by so many experts already, it's prone to abuse. Is it something that we need right now? What I mentioned a while ago is that we are in a time when we're in cyberspace, and the new law also created a portal for enforcement into cyberspace. The old law may have given provisions that it can or it may, but not clearly enough. What the new law gave focus on is, as I mentioned a while ago, critical infrastructure, and it allows enforcement into cyberspace in a time when we have so many critics of the administration, in a time when we have so many critics of the government, and people who post things in social media have already been targeted before. People who make posts that have been labeled as insurgent, as a threat to national security, have been summoned to the NBI. What more now that a new law has been created empowering the government to arrest people who are doing activities in social media? That's the negative part.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned those positive and negative effects of the law, and given the number of petitions that have been filed before the High Court, and of course, many people have claimed that the anti-terrorism law is questionable because of those provisions or some provisions. In your perspective, is the law questionable? Well, if yes, what is worrisome about it? Or if not, then what should be clarified about it?
Right now, the question there is that the law has not yet even taken effect. It has just been signed and promulgated, so it has just been born.
Mm-hmm.
The problem there is that it's a potential for ill right now. It's putting gasoline into a bonfire. It's making things explode. People are already afraid. It makes people afraid of making posts. It makes people afraid of being critical of the government. Bawal magsalita, bawal pumuna. In England, there's no checks and balance because there's no separation of powers. The Prime Minister is also a member of Congress. In the Philippines, the President is a separate entity from Congress and the Supreme Court. There, all the three powers that are supposed to be in chess with each other so that they cannot work together to abuse the people, it's been fused together. In the Philippines, they've been separated into three different offices so that they could check each other. What we are witnessing right now is as if there is no separation between the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the executive branch. It's as if, I'm not saying that it is, it's as if, because the President asks for a law, Congress immediately acts on it. When in the past few years, it doesn't happen that way. It's slow. Shouldn't I be happy that legislation is faster right now? In a way, we should be happy. But how about better laws for health? When we want to make things fast, it becomes fast. But when things are the ones that the people need, no, it's not really being given attention. That particular system is given a doorway into the internet. Anyone can be accused. You can disappear. They have a shield. Okay, they have a shield. Given the chance, I would like to show it. If I could share it, it's part of that. It's part of that law. They shield themselves by saying that committing an act of activism, making an act of protest, will not be constituted as an act of terrorism. They have that shield. That's why I mentioned a while ago that it's hypocritical. They place that there so that they can always claim that, well, you can always say whatever you want. But if you say something that threatens the critical infrastructure, then they can use it against you. So you made a protest, then they will say, well, you made a protest, but then your protest created a threat on the stability of the Philippines. They can exaggerate it that way. I'm saying this now so they are prevented from doing that act, hopefully.
All right. Now, sir, in light of the 28 petitions filed against it or the law in the Supreme Court, what do multiple petitions assailing a law's constitutionality indicate? I mean, historically, does it follow that because a law has been questioned several times, that means that the law's provisions will be deemed unconstitutional?
Definitely not. Definitely not. It's the same way as just because everybody thinks something is right doesn't mean that it is right. Just because there's so many people saying that EJK is right doesn't make it right. Just because there are countries that have abortion doesn't make it right. Just because there are so many cases filed against the anti-terror law doesn't make the cases against it right, and doesn't make the anti-terror law unconstitutional. It still needs its day in court.
All right, sir.
Right. Final word. I mean, do you think people should be worried now, given that this law has been signed? Why or why not, in your perspective?
It's not worry. Something that I should tell people that we should know is that we should stop worrying. It's easier said than done, no? It's easier said than done. But we should be doing our best to relax, citizen. And we should not worry, but instead we should be vigilant.
Very well said, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, for enlightening us, Assistant Professor Ronald Castillo.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And that wraps up today's episode. We are hoping you've learned important information that'll help you understand the importance of your rights and carry on with your peaceful dissent.
In these trying times, take hold of your right and always remain critical and vigilant. Thomasians, it's time to keep our eyes open. Once again, I am Seril.
And I am Alzel. Join us again on the next episode of Wake Up Thomasians.